except that your explanation breaks all of the rules of reality as we understand them. We have never observed a causeless, uncaused, non-interdependent thing giving rise to anything. We actually have a complete explanation, except for the fact that we can't explain why. Let me make my argument a little more formally now. Roughly speaking, there are mental things and physical things in reality. It is your mind, which is non-physical, that goes from lifetime to lifetime. In order for each new moment of your consciousness to arise, you have to put forward the reason that there was a moment of your consciousness prior to this one, giving rise to the current moment of awareness. In the case of the physical universe, it's a little bit different because in the formative stages of the universe, it's arising in relation to all of the conscious beings who will later inhabit that universe, so it's a bit different. But once those particles have arisen, likewise they exist in a causal continuum where the previous moment of a particle causes the next moment of a particle in a quantized way. This is actually called momentariness in Buddhist philosophy and has been part of our literature since, I think, at least the 6th century. When you ask physicists, they don't say that nothing existed before this universe. They say that you can't see past the singularity of the Big Bang. And there are at least a few physicists, like Dr. Penrose, who say that there's some chance, some possibility, that there are beginningless, infinite universes behind this one. And that's the Buddhist position. So in brief, why do we see conscious things now and physical things now? Because there's a causal continuum that goes back in time where mental and physical things are causing more mental and physical things. So as long as we simply accept that existence exists and has always existed in some form, then we actually have a complete explanation, except for the fact that we can't explain why existence itself exists. Turning to the Christian position now. If we say that you need something outside the system to explain the system, we haven't actually solved the fundamental problem that existence itself seems to demand an explanation. If we say that there is a timeless, immaterial, powerful, cognizant, intelligent, good deity that exists, well, now we once again have the problem of existence itself to deal with. And I'm not actually saying that that deity itself must be caused. I'm simply saying that you haven't actually fixed this fundamental problem that you claim is the problem with my position. My position is existence exists, and as long as we are comfortable saying, well, we don't have a good explanation for why existence as a whole exists, we're okay. However, if you say, well, I'm not okay with that, I'd like an explanation for how that exists, and to explain that, I'm going to invoke something else that has the exact same problem, i.e., it exists, and it's always existed, and doesn't need an explanation for its existence. I think you haven't actually solved the problem. The way that theologians attempt to solve this problem is by saying that this being is a necessary being. What they mean by this is that the rest of reality is contingent in the sense that it could have turned out some other way, it may not have existed, it depends upon causes, and that deity doesn't need or depend upon anything else whatsoever. This introduces a few additional problems which can be revealed if you look at the nature of that deity. The nature of that deity, in terms of how it exists, must be either changing or unchanging. And once again, I'm not talking about its attributes. A thing exists as a being, and then it has qualities or attributes as part of its being. I'm talking about its nature. If there's a creator deity, the nature of its existence must either be changing or unchanging. Generally speaking, even when you look at great theologians like Aquinas, there's this strong recognition from 2,000 years of philosophical thinking that changing things come from other changing things. In other words, they're caused. Unchanging things can't come from something else because that would require interaction, change, a doing, a moving. And thus, Aquinas, for example, labeled the creator deity as an unmoved mover, a causeless cause. I don't think he said that, but Other theologians have made these kinds of statements, and you can find them all throughout the literature. But what this is actually saying is that this deity breaks the laws of logic, reason, and reality as we understand them. So you've introduced a new thing that exists. In other words, it has the same problem as reality. It seems to exist without an explanation for how and why it exists in the first place, except that your explanation breaks all of the rules of reality as we understand them. And my explanation abides by all of the rules of reality as we understand them. All you need to make my explanation work as a Buddhist is that causality continues beyond that wall of the Big Bang that you can't see through. What you need to make this other explanation work is that for at least one being in reality, they don't need to be interdependent in the same way as everything else. They don't need to abide by the laws of causality as the same way as everything else. They don't need to abide by the laws of logic the same way as everything else. So with my explanation, the Buddhist explanation, you have an infinite series of causes that don't have an explanation for why they exist in the first place, but there is no first place because they've always existed. There's no first. It's an infinite causal chain. In the other example, you have a deity whose existence also can't be explained, but within the nature of that deity, they break all of the laws and rules of reality as we understand them. So I think between the two options, the one that doesn't break all the rules of reality is probably the better one. To just hammer this home one more time, my explanation involves changing things, caused things, giving rise to more caused things over and over and over and over again, which is all that we have ever observed in the entire history of our observations of science and probably also spiritual practice, right? We have never observed a causeless, uncaused, non interdependent thing giving rise to anything.